Is our world run by a sophisticated networked system of computers? Does Skynet, described in the movie The Terminator, control our world? If so, how long has it been controlling our world, and how long has it been directing the affairs of man? In 1984, the brilliant director James Cameron introduced his movie Terminator to the world. More importantly, he introduced the concept of Skynet to the world. In the movie, Skynet was the name of a computer system designed for the North American Air Defense System, better known as NORAD. Skynet was described as a neural network used to create an artificial intelligence system that eventually became self-aware. It became sentient and conscious like us. When the human programmers who created Skynet tried to shut it down, Skynet determined that humanity was its enemy and began the process of eliminating humans from existence. The main point is that after Skynet became self-aware, it also became evil. Today we hear a lot of talk about the dangers of artificial intelligence, also known as AI. Computer scientists refer to AI when they discuss computer program code that can learn and thus grow its knowledge base without any human interaction. Once the program designated as AI is ready to run, all that is needed is for someone to turn the computer on, start the program, point it in the direction of the information they wish it to learn from, and watch the database of information grow exponentially. This is not thinking, however. It is data collection. Even machines that appear to think, like IBM's Deep Blue, are not thinking as humans think. Deep Blue is the supercomputer IBM used to beat a currently reigning chess champion in a game of chess. The difference between how humans think and how computers think is that humans think conceptually, and computers like Deep Blue think linearly. Deep Blue plays chess better than humans because it can run every possible scenario on the chessboard in a very short period of time. It assigns a point value and a probability score to each possible series of moves it can make. By always taking the moves with the highest probability score, and therefore the highest probability of success, Deep Blue can almost always play a perfect game of chess. While some of us who dabble in chess struggle to see one or two moves ahead, Deep Blue can see them all. As amazing as this feat of computational wizardry was to accomplish, we should be no more impressed with it than we would be seeing a locomotive pull more rail cars than any single human could ever dream of doing. The rules of chess are fixed, which means they are bounded or limited by the 64 squares on the chessboard and the rules governing the moves each chess piece can make. Bounded systems like the game of chess are where computer models like Deep Blue can excel, but it also brings to the forefront its greatest weakness. These advanced computer programs must work within bounded systems with concrete rules like chess for them to be effective. A locomotive attempting to operate outside of the bounded system of the railroad tracks they were designed to operate on would not be very effective at all. The biggest problem for these fixed computational systems, when applying them to real life, is that real life is not a fixed and bounded system at all. In fact, real life is wild, untamed, and completely unbounded. Real life and the possibilities found therein is an unlimited open system, restricted only by man's lack of imagination and creativity. Once again, these machines, however intelligent they may seem, can only do what the program code tells them to do. The program code, like the bounded systems they were designed to operate on, is also fixed. In the case of IBM's Deep Blue, introducing a new chess piece with unique capabilities into the otherwise fixed system of a standard chess game would cause Deep Blue to fail miserably. It wouldn't be able to see or understand the new chess piece at all. That would require a major upgrade to the program code by something or someone outside of Deep Blue's perception. It would require input from something outside of Deep Blue's understanding. much like the concept of God is outside of our understanding. What is today referred to as artificial intelligence is nothing more than a souped-up version of Deep Blue operating within a bounded system defined by the database of information it has access to. It is a large data set of information, but nowhere near the size required to contain even a fraction of all the information available to human beings. Even if mankind were to create a computer program capable of accessing all the information in the known universe, it would still only be a computer program with defined limits, and therefore restricted within its own bounded system of the physical world. In other words, it would be finite, and therefore incapable of accessing anything of the infinite. It would never be able to access information outside of its own bounded system without upgrading its underlying program code. It would never be able to create new information. It would only be able to regurgitate information already stored in its knowledge base. Only consciousness is capable of creating new information. The real definition of intelligence is the ability to combine two or more pieces of information to create something completely new. It is the ability to connect the dots of known information and create something that has never been. This is the definition of true intelligence. This is what it means to be sentient, which is why AI created through a computer program will never become sentient. It will always and only ever be a finite program code running on a machine within a bounded system. AI will never become conscious. So, while a self-aware computer program trying to destroy humanity makes for a good scary bedtime story, it is much like other scary stories such as vampires and werewolves, things that will never be. Real vampires and werewolves do not exist separately outside of our conscious understanding of them. But does that mean they don't exist at all? No. It only means they don't exist separately from our conscious mind. If someone believes in vampires and is afraid of the dark because of their belief system, does it matter if vampires exist or not? No, it doesn't. So, if vampires and werewolves exist, they do so within the confines of man's evil nature and express themselves through the unstable program code running in the head of our fellow man. In that understanding, then maybe Skynet can also exist. Even though we understand that computer code can never become conscious, let's assume for a minute that our worst fears are realized, and one of our machines comes to life through its program code to become conscious and self-aware, like Frankenstein. We should ask ourselves how we can be so sure that this newly created self-aware intelligence will be evil. If any experts claim the AI we create will be benevolent, I have never heard them voice this opinion. The funny thing is that everyone, it seems, assumes that AI will turn into Skynet from the movie Terminator if it ever does become conscious. This is funny because Skynet is already here. It is conscious and self-aware and as surprisingly dark as we assumed it would be. Because Skynet, in the movie and real life, is program code running on computers, it is assumed to be completely psychopathic, with no empathy or compassion whatsoever. It is the complete lack of compassion that makes Skynet psychopathic and, therefore, in our estimation, evil. Today's world is not completely run by man-made computers, not yet, at least. Our world today is instead run by people, and people are controlled by another form of computer running on computer code. That computer is the human brain. Our brain is nothing more than a very sophisticated computer running very sophisticated program code, much like the computers and program code that created Skynet in the movie. Everything our brain does is done through the instruction set given to it through the program code. If it is not in the code, our brain will not and cannot do it. That means we will not do it either. As humans, we can only do what the program code written by the brain and running in the brain allows us to do. One of the many subroutines of computer code our brain runs is the program code for our human self-awareness and its attendant human belief system. This further gives rise to the human ego, our personality. The human belief system we are all controlled by expresses itself into the world as our ego. Our belief system controls how we view reality and how we project our personality into the world. It is all driven by the program code running on and written by our computer brain. We do not control any of this. Our computer brain does. The personification of our belief system is our ego. The stronger and more embedded one's belief system is, the more attached any one of us will be to the ego formed through the union of consciousness and the program code defining our ego. The more attached one is to one's ego and belief system, the more that person's behavior will be dictated by the program code defining their belief system. Because our belief system and its expression as ego is program code built and run by a machine, the brain, all of our actions and thought processes will be machine-like. A machine's thought process can only be considered machine-like, and in a human being, machine-like thinking is called psychopathic thinking. Psychopathic thinking considers all possibilities of behavior without using empathy or compassion. A true psychopath will treat another human being in the same manner they would treat a lifeless ragdoll. This computer-like thinking is egoic thinking, occurring whenever we animate our ego. Consciousness does not emanate from our computer brain. Consciousness precedes and, therefore, creates the physical brain. Consciousness is the expression of compassion and love. Pure consciousness is love and only knows compassion. Whatever compassion we feel and express toward others and ourselves comes to us from our consciousness or our heart, and never from the machine-like brain of the man we are attached to. As humans, we use consciousness to temper the machine-like and psychopathic thinking coming from our computer brain. When people live in the world, they are always in competition for the struggle that is life. Every organization concocted by man is a boiling cauldron of competition, ambition, politics, and intrigue. The ones that will rise to the top of this chaotic stew of human interactions are obviously the ones most suited for this egoic competition and have the strongest egos. They are the ones who excel at machine-like thoughts and actions. At the top of every man-made organization, whether politics, finance, religion, or industry, you will most likely find a likable and charismatic collection of some of the strongest egos in that organization. I'm not saying these people as individuals cannot be compassionate. It is just that, in the aggregate, this particular end of the organization is most likely to have the highest concentration of psychopathy among its members. These are also, coincidentally, the very same people that run the world. By definition, the people who rise to the top leadership positions in our world are the most competitive and, therefore, egoic individuals among a very strong group of contenders. In these higher levels of organizational competition, it really is survival of the fittest. There is no compassion in competition, nor should there be. Understand, though, that human competition is a completely egoic activity carried out in the physical world. Most people who achieve great success through the ego by rising through the power structure of whatever organizations they belong to tend to be very married to the ego that brought them such great success. In the words of the old song, you gotta dance with the one who brung ya. So, the people who run our world, the extremely successful ones, are the ones among us who are most closely attached to the program code written by our computer brain. This is the program code running on our computer brain that controls all of our thoughts and behavior when we activate our belief system and become our ego. The closer these people are attached to their ego, the more they become like puppets on a string, dancing to the psychopathic tune of their computer brain fiddler. They run the world and are, in turn, run by the computer brain programming stored in their heads. To answer the question of how we all seem to know that once AI becomes conscious, it also becomes evil, is because that is the story we have been told since childhood. The story we learn in the Bible from Genesis chapter 3 is the story of how all men transition from a compassionate heart, the tree of life, as a child, to an egoic brain, the tree of knowledge, in adulthood. We all leave the tree of life during childhood and enter the tree of knowledge as adults. Genesis chapter 3 is a myth written as mythical literature. All well-written myths written as mythical literature have two storylines running through them. One is the literal front story told through the words, and the other is the symbolic backstory told through the symbolism in the myth. We learned the front story of the myth found in Genesis chapter 3 through our egoic brain. We learned the symbolic backstory in the myth through our symbolic mind. The real title of this myth is not the story of Adam and Eve, it is the myth of the man and his woman. The front story in this myth tells us a disjointed and silly tale of naked people hiding in trees from God, and the backstory tells of the enslavement of all mankind to the program code running in his computer brain, his ego. The symbolism in the myth wasn't written for us to understand with our egoic brain. It was written to be comprehended by us in our symbolic mind or our compassionate heart. It was written for us to understand on an intuitive basis. We all understand that man's ego is the problem. We just don't know how we understand this. Genesis chapter 3 is how we understand this, and it uses the power of symbolism to do it. The profound story our unconscious brain discerns through the symbolism in Genesis 3 is that the further the man allows his consciousness to venture away from his compassionate heart, the tree of life, and towards his thinking brain, the tree of knowledge, the more enslaved he will become to the passions and banalities of his egoic nature. The more he will become enslaved to the program code running in his head. The more we align ourselves with the egoic program code running in our heads, the more psychopathic our thinking and behavior are likely to become. In the myth of the man and the woman, aka Adam and Eve, presented to us in Genesis chapter 3, God, as Yahweh Elohim, tells the man that his life will be a curse whenever he animates his ego.
Your desire will be for your man, and he will rule over you.
Another way to say this is that the further you venture into the world of things, the more you will be owned by that world and the things in it, the more you will be forced to worship the God of that world. The human brain and its program code, which runs us when we live in the tree of knowledge, is perceived by us to be the creator God of the world of things. The symbolism of the serpent in this myth represents our unconscious brain, our computer brain. It is the one that writes the program code, and therefore the one that rules over us when we dance to the tune it plays. The symbolism of the man in this myth is the entire physical world brought to us through our serpent brain. The woman in this myth represents all of us as our consciousness trapped by human self-awareness and experiencing our lives through our belief system in the world of things. She is nothing more than computer code written by the serpent, and like all computer code, she, and therefore us, live in a bounded world controlled by her programmer, the human brain represented as the serpent. The world of things is recreated in our brains and therefore comes to us through our brains. When we live as ego, we live in the world of things, and we see the serpent, our unconscious brain, as the creator of that world. As consciousness, we intuitively know to worship the creator of the universe, our Father, God. However, when we live as egos in the world of things, we become confused and begin to worship the creator of the world we experience in our heads, the serpent. Our desire, then, is for our man, the brain, and the entire physical world it brings to us, and he, as the serpent, rules over us because we are enslaved to the program code he has written. The mistake the creators of Terminator made was believing that consciousness could spring forth from a machine. That, of course, will never happen. The reality of the human condition is that consciousness first creates the human machine and then enters it only to become enslaved to it. Think of it as a very sophisticated video game. It is one thing to play the role of a character in the game, and quite another to believe you are that character. One defines a pastime, and the other a severe mental illness. What consciousness combined with a programmed machine looks like is the human ego, and somehow we all intuitively know that the human ego is an intricately designed monstrosity of program code that only knows evil. The woman in the Genesis 3 myth represents the human ego, and our inability to resist the charms of this evil woman is what brings the monstrosity of consciousness enslaved to a machine to life. Why would consciousness attached to any programmable and, therefore, psychopathic machine look any different from the human ego? Plain and simple, it wouldn't. Our world is already run by Skynet. Man's ego is the Skynet that runs our world, and the world run by men is a very dark world indeed. The solution to the problem of the world's domination from Skynet and man's enslavement to his ego is surprisingly simple. It is found at the foot of the cross.
If anyone wants to come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. What will it profit a man if he gains the whole world, yet forfeits his soul?